Great, man. Well,
Making me nervous
thank,
now.
yeah, yeah. Take a sip of your beer while you're at it. This is happy hour.
Yeah.
Charles, thanks for spending some time with us today, this afternoon, or I guess this evening, and speaking with us kind of from the world of the brokerage side. I think a lot of people coming into the space, they really struggle a little bit just to understand your world and how you all view it. And so you're really in the trenches, and also you have the unique perspective in the way that you came the opposite way of most people. Most people start in brokerage and go into ownership. You did the reverse, which I think is really fascinating, which I would love to jump into. And maybe that's where we start. We start
Yeah.
with kind of how why you made that jump and maybe the things that you've learned through that, and then we can kind of expand on that, and we can take this conversation to a lot of interesting places.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, uh, it's pretty normal for me to do something weird like that, like go the exact opposite of how most people did it, go owner to broker. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom would probably tell you that doesn't seem strange to her considering me, but um, I think when I got out of the ownership side, when it kind of, when I left, when I left that side of the business, um, what I saw from where I was at was when you don't have a lot of money of your own and you're out there raising capital, um, it can be kind of challenging to make really good money being a capital raiser. Like it's all like you're almost kicking the can down the road. You're like, okay, well, at some point I'll make some money, like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it'll be there. And so when I came out of the ownership side with my old partners, looking at the next thing to do, um, my thing was, I already had that, and it's like, okay, well, do I want to keep doing that, or does brokering make a ton of sense? That's kind of the way that my thought process was, and really, what I was trying to do with brokering was, I can pull in a lot of money doing that, a lot of money immediately. I've got a lot of depreciation that's saved up from owning parks. So I got a ton of that to cover up income that I make today. So it makes sense from a tax standpoint, at least for right now. And then the next time I go revisit being an owner, now I've actually got my own capital to play with instead of just being a guy that's, giving all of the investments money away to the investor. I can actually put in alongside of them and make some money with them. That's the hardest thing about raising money for a deal. If you don't have any of your own money, when you really start breaking down the nominal dollars that you make, even on a 100 unit deal, it starts getting pretty thin, you know?
Isn't that fascinating? Because I
Yeah.
saw the same thing. I mean, coming into real estate, I came to this business for $30,000, and that was 4 years ago. And we've done, a few transactions. And the thing that was wildest to me was even if you do really well with that $30,000, it takes so long before it actually it gets to real numbers, and it takes a couple turns of a portfolio, which is why people are in the buy, fix, refinance, or sell so quickly, because that incentivizes the GP to get their money back so then they can reinvest and double it again, right? It's like or triple it or quadruple it in the capital multiplication. But going into real estate, I totally underestimated that, like wildly underestimated how much it takes, like how much momentum of a snowball you have to get before you get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm actually doing okay now.
Yeah. I didn't think it was a get rich quick scheme. Like I kind of knew that it was
Yeah.
going to take some time, but um,
Time is relative.
there were some points in time where I had trouble paying my own rent. So
Wow.
it's like, it's like, damn, I mean, I'm supposed to be this big shot, and it's like, now I'm like having trouble paying my own bills and stuff. And, to the marketplace, like we were raising a bunch of money and buying a bunch of deals. And it's like, I'm freaking starving over here.
Yeah.
Um, and, it really did take actually going full cycle on a deal or two to where now it's like, that's not a problem anymore. I full
Right.
cycle on a deal, got some capital to play with and got it back out into the marketplace into some various things. But early on, same situation as you. I didn't I had a little bit more than 30,000. I had like 60. But I put that 60 out, and then I also cash advanced a bunch of credit cards. So I probably put myself in that position where
Yeah.
I was like feeding the beast there a little bit. And it kind of caught up with me, and not like at an inopportune time. And I had some struggles there with like paying my own bills. Um, and then
This
got
is
through
brutally
that.
honest, though, which I love. Like, this
Right.
is a brutally honest conversation that a lot of people don't have. And real estate is all this passive cash flow mailbox money that people love to talk about. And there's aspects of that, but there's like real, true honesty with what you're saying that I think is really valuable. And what it sounds like, if I'm sorry for cutting you off, but brokerage allowed you a sales generation machine to build capital quicker than you feel like you would have had in ownership. Am I miscategorizing that?
No, I mean, brokerage is what it looked like to me when I transitioned to brokerage was, and it's kind of starting to work out that way. I mean, it takes time to learn anything. It doesn't, the brokerage industry they didn't give a crap about my ownership history. I mean, they kind of did, but it it presented its own challenges that were unique to people that do the same thing that I do, which is like I'm set in my ways as an owner, and like I know how I would operate something, but I don't necessarily see how the market would operate it.
Yep.
Um, so those presented its own challenges, but yeah, I mean that was the point of it. It was just now it's like, okay, well, I know how to operate these things. I know what type of opportunity I would go after, and the next time I go get one, I want to have a little bit of my own money to put into it, so that from a standpoint of like, if I'm going to spend 10, 15 hours a week focusing on this property, that I know at least like my hourly income of doing that's not going to be like $5 an hour or something, like it might
Yeah.
be if you own 20 or 30 parks in a fund, and you really start
Yeah.
breaking down your 100-hour work week and how much money you're going to make. uh, it is a long-term game. You got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And my balance sheet looks really, really good, but
Yeah.
my monthly income does not look that great. So
It's so real, man. This is a raw truth that a lot of people don't consider, and I've experienced myself in this business. And it's. I love the fact that you're being so candid with this, just because it's the reality of real estate. If you're not coming in with a large amount of money, it's a wildly different game. If you're coming in with, not much money, it's just a grind. It's really a grind, and it takes a long time, and it's a real business, and it's real delayed gratification.
yeah,
And so if you don't own much of that deal, then it can be brutal. And if you have to return their capital before you get your promote, I mean, on some of
yeah,
these heavy value add deals, it takes what, 5 years to start to see this stuff.
it
Maybe.
does. It takes a return of capital too is dependent on a lot of factors. I mean,
Right.
it's dependent on lending being positioned correctly. It's depending on you doing your job as a sponsor, and that's also doing your job without getting paid. So, there's a lot of things that go into it, but the long-term aspects of it, I mean, you're still better off taking whatever it is, like 20,000, 30,000 a year, and sucking it up. And then going through it, and having a balance sheet that's $2 or $3 million. That's still better than working a job making $100,000 a year.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. Like,
still better than that.
there's massive trade-offs between that, but to your point, the investment vehicle compounding takes time to actually work its magic. It's not something that you don't compound in 2 years. I've been in this now for 5 years, and we're starting to see some of those, the fruits of our labor come through. But it was, I mean, there's some times where I was just like, you question things, and that's just a really fascinating way to really start off this conversation. It kind of allows you to be, that's a platform for you to kind of jump from. So ownership in general, it sounds like through the partnership that you had, you decided brokerage was a better path for you. Was that because you wanted to own more of the deals yourself? when you got back into ownership, or was that just for you, you saw maybe a gap in the way that brokers view the space, and you thought, given your ownership experience, you could fill that because you had a unique perspective?
I think brokerage made a lot of sense to me, not for any like well thought out reason. It was really like, I had some like Glenn Esterson, the guy that I'm partnered with now, I was seeing how much money he was putting in his pocket, and seeing how much Kevin Anger was putting in his pocket, and how much, Mike Nisley was putting in his pocket. And it's like, I want to do that. I feel like, like I feel like I could probably jump into that game, and my learning curve wouldn't be as bad as most new guys would be. It's been a lot steeper than I thought that it would be, but it's a lot closer than maybe a new guy coming off the street would be. But it's still, there's still a lot that goes into brokering that's done behind the scenes that most people don't know about.
Yeah, and so the group, from what I understand, I did a poll not too long ago of kind of where people were at and the amount of deals that they actually owned. How do you, a large percentage of people own less than 10 communities. And I mean, 10 communities is still a large amount of communities, but help us understand, I guess, how brokers see the world and why they do kind of some of the things they do that from the outside as an owner, it just feels like, what prices are wildly out of control. Like people are going crazy. Like there's a method to why things are happening the way that they are. And now that you've been on both sides, like maybe you could just see how a broker sees through a deal and how they kind of present that.
Your typical broker, the way that they see a deal is, let's say there's a group of 100 people this deal would be appropriate for.
Yep.
The price that I pick out is not meant to appeal to all 100 people.
Good point.
It's meant to basically appeal to maybe 10 of those people. And the price that I pick out 9 times out of 10 probably isn't the price that it'll trade at, but it is a price that, it probably will disqualify 90 people. They'll get mad. They'll go post on LinkedIn or whatever and do their thing. But 10 of those people, they'll actually take a run at it. And what I'm planning for a lot of times is I pick a price point, or I try to be the one that picks it. I mean, a lot of times the seller wants to pick it, but if I get to pick it, then I'm picking a price point that's going to be, and this is my theory on it. I mean, a lot of guys have their own theories, but my theory on it is when I pick a price point, it should represent the top of the market plus 5%, which is what Marcus and Millichap's like by the book definition of how you pick your price point is it's top of the market plus 5%. And what it does is it encourages a workable set of offers to come in at a certain range that I can now work these offers into a strike price range.
Yeah.
And so when I'm pitching a seller, I'm pitching them on, it's a plan. It's a plan of, I want to take it out at this price. I expect to see at least 4 or 5 offers come in at this range. And I can then work those offers up to this range for you so that you can pick between, 2 or 3 based on whatever your metrics of picking are.
Yeah.
So like it happens all the time. And the guy that has the highest offer he's not always the guy that wins. It's the guy who came in strong and who also has a good track record. That's the guy that normally wins. Your track record sometimes allows you to underpay in the brokerage world because of your assurance of closing. If you have a good reputation with that broker, the broker's going to go to bat for you with the owner. And if you're underpriced from somebody else, you're probably still winning,
Right.
And that's really ultimately our job is to kind of pre-plan the process of going from list to contract. And then once we're under contract, again, we haven't gotten paid yet at this point, to make sure that it goes through the steps that we're trying to get out in front of any little way that a renegotiation can happen. any type of renegotiation thing that might be possible, that we're actually getting out in front of those things and keeping the deal going on a timeline and then getting it closed so that we can get paid.
Yeah.
And that's really what our job is. You know, a lot of things, you know, part of what I do with Glenn over at Marcus is I try to find, working with a software engineer, and we're trying to find different things that we can actually automate in our process. And so we have at least come to the conclusion you can't automate out brokers. I've tried, but
I mean, the thing I love about you, Charles, is you're always willing to look at things in a way that take out human error. I mean, you've done that with your database, with modeling, with a lot of aspects of the, you know, I think management, you've really kind of played with that as well. Is, you know, in your way to really like almost trying to like make it almost like McDonald's, where there's like, it's so broken down that like a robot could do it, right? Like you're very good at breaking down something very complex into something very simple and then distributing that across a lot of people. And that is a really, I think, great skill that you have that I've noticed over the past, because I mean, I talked to you in September of 2015 is when we first connected. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And
I still had not bought a park yet, but I was telling you how to buy your first one.
you were a broker, man. Before you even started. I love it. And so you talked a lot about reputation and importance of having a track record with a broker. So if you're coming into the game, so you don't have many parks, you haven't worked with many brokers, you see some deals that, how do you like kind of stand out? I mean, I know it's really hard in this environment when it's really a seller's market. Even with all the stuff going on, it seems like, you know, deals haven't really slowed down. You know, lending might have contracted a little bit, but from the conversations I've had with people, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's still a large appetite for mobile home parks. Like this isn't like a lot of people are predicting like crazy predictions, which I don't think are coming true. But how do you stand out as a newcomer into the business, other than just being, you know, non-refundable money or something like that? Or do you think it makes sense to play the off-market game, gain some credibility, and then come into the brokerage game? Like how do you gain a competitive edge?
You should be playing the off-market game no matter who you are. Doesn't matter who you, like, you could be the biggest guy in the world, you should be playing that off-market game.
Yep.
Which, you know, that's probably not what Marcus wants me to say, but that's what you should be doing. Outside of that, what stands out to me when a buyer comes to me and starts giving me their criteria is that they can paint a really good picture of exactly what they want and why. And so, like if I was going back out, like if I stopped brokering today and I was going to go back out and start pitching brokers on sending deals to me, I like infill projects from a buying standpoint. That's what I like these days, because I think that there's a little bit of a pricing anomaly there. I think that
we got to talk on that. I'm going to let you finish your thought, but I think this is where you're going to provide a lot of value for this community, because I think a lot of people misunderstand how to value those infill opportunities, but we'll continue on that.
Yeah. And so the picture that I would paint with a broker, if I was going to go pitch a broker right now, would be, I'm looking for a deal that's more or less an infill type deal, and that it's something that does not qualify for Fannie Mae today, but if I do X, Y, Z things, that it would qualify for Fannie Mae. Because what I'm trying to do with it is I'm trying to raise money, get that investor's capital into the deal, be able to build a reasonable plan over 3 or 4 years and get their money back to them in 3 or 4 years. And so that's what I would tell a broker was, I want something that does not qualify for agency debt today, but that you could see, you know, assuming that I come in there and improve some tenant-owned homes, or if I repay some roads, or if I do whatever to fit the requirements in, that as long as I did those things, and those things it wasn't like, you know, I'm not talking like a 500 unit deal that's got 200 vacant or 200 plus vacant units. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about something where it's like 10 units or 15 units away from a Fannie Mae loan.
So tell me, like, just for our audience, what's kind of like right down the fairway kind of Fannie Mae deal? Like, what's a deal that they'll do? I mean, obviously, coronavirus kind of threw a wrench and stuff, but like typically over the last 3 deals, like what's straight down the fairway? What's going to get Fannie Mae that they're going to, get that deal done?
It depends on who you talk to on the mortgage broker side. And I think that the mortgage broker you use is probably just as valuable in getting your Fannie Mae deal done.
Interesting. Okay.
But some brokers will tell you that it needs to have a physical occupancy, which is like number of homes versus number of total homes, not homes that have human beings in it or anything like that, but the number of physical homes there on site needs to make up somewhere around 80 to 85% of the total lots. You can almost feel out the condition. Like you can kind of feel it, when it's in the condition it needs to be for a Fannie Mae loan, but Fannie Mae is stretching. So you might be shocked at what gets through, but they change their requirements all the time, but you can kind of look at one and kind of be like, this might be one that can go Fannie Mae. This might not be.
So if we're quantifying that, like, let's say, are we talking mostly vinyl shingled homes? Like they have to be mostly double wide? Can they be metal on metal? Like let's put maybe and I know these things, again, as Charles said, is the relationships of the people you have that are going to bat for you for these loans, and your experience as an operator helps, and your liquidity network. I mean, there's several things that you have to check off for a Fannie Mae loan outside of just being a nice deal. Like you gotta pass a couple of things, right? But having the right mortgage broker is going to help you, and we can get into that too. But like, what's like, if we're trying to quantify, obviously paved roads probably, like 75 lots. Like, what's the kind of dollar figure, just so people have an idea?
50 lots. The really big, hard and fast ones are like, it's got to be over 50 lots. They don't mean like 50 lots is a big one for them. If you got 48 lots and the mortgage balance fits a Fannie Mae loan, which is 1.5 million, they still won't do it, most likely.
Interesting.
Unless you're pairing it up with something else, like cross collateralizing it. So 50 lots at a minimum. You got to have that. You got to be able to get them a mortgage balance of 1.5 million. A lot of times when you're buying a Fannie Mae deal at market price, you're almost, too many guys want to go over leverage these things. You're almost better off going like, your cash on cash is probably better going like 70% LTV versus 80, just because, at a certain point when you over leverage, the cash on cash starts working against you the opposite way.
Yep.
So 70% LTV, like run your model at 70% LTV. If you can get a $1.5 million loan, that's, you probably want to be more like 2 to kind of be sure you're going to get it. And then when you look at the condition of the park, as long as the guy that's going to show up to approve or deny your Fannie Mae loan is not going to be disgusted, that's a good one to just look at it. And if he's going to be disgusted by this thing, then, just keep in mind, this is like some white glove guy from an office that's going to show up,
Yeah.
So if it's disgusting, that he's not going to do it.
So that usually means, relatively well-kept yards. So people are relatively, the homes aren't falling apart. They're skirting around these homes. There's no like obvious blemishes when you're driving through this, or any feelings of like, when you drive in some communities and you're like, I kind of feel unsafe here. Like none of that, obviously. I've heard they're really particular on like concrete or asphalt driveways. Is that true?
Yeah, they want that. They want those driveways. And keep in mind, these cosmetic things, these are things where, so a lot of deals don't get done through Fannie Mae because of a cosmetic issue. Like it fits the, occupancy is like 80-85% physical occupancy. Your park owned home inventory can't be more than like 20%. And you get waivers for some of these things. And then your loan balance probably needs to be more like 2 million, but you can do 1.5, and then over 50 lots. The cosmetic stuff though, what I've seen work really well is, if you have the ability to do it, is to go ahead and close the loan through cash or through a bridge loan and just go do the cosmetic improvements. I mean, if you got
Yeah.
to resurface a road, because a lot of times if it can't get Fannie Mae debt, the cap rate on that deal is going to be priced accordingly. It's going to be priced against a spread of the interest rate. And so if I can't get Fannie Mae debt, there's no CMBS now, so I'm not going to price against that debt.
Yeah.
Now
So
I'm pricing
you have
against
a
local bank
recourse,
debt.
right? Now you have going from non-recourse to recourse.
Right.
And
I
so
go buy the thing at a 7.5 cap and spend about 6 months. I close it cash and spend about 6 months fixing it up, or I close it with a bridge loan and take about 6 months just putting lipstick on it. And then all of a sudden I get into a Fannie Mae loan, and now the thing, I'm running a 2.5 point spread over a 3.5% interest rate. I got a 6 cap deal now.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's where the anomaly comes into play, is taking a deal that could otherwise be a Fannie Mae loan and fixing the discrepancies of that deal. And however fast you can do that is, to me, is I usually try to value it based on a sliding scale of how quickly you can do that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I push price on that narrative, and really pushing price is all about what you can justify. And to me, I think a lot of brokers would focus on the purchase loan of that and sort of ignore the opportunity to do a 6 month or a 12-month fix and get it ready for Fannie Mae.
Yeah.
I try to blend those two cap rates together and try to sell that at a blended cap rate of that. So if it's a 7.5 cap without Fannie Mae and a 6.5 cap with Fannie Mae, I might try to sell it as 7.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about valuation here, because I don't want to get too much into the loan side, just because your job deals with that, but it's not like dedicated to that, right?
Right.
So let's talk about upside and how you view upside as a broker, because people coming into the industry, and I know I was very guilty of this as well. When I first came in, the way I view upside is, if there's vacant pads, I'm giving you $0 for that, because I have to invest $25,000 for a used home, $45,000 for a new home for me to actually get any income on this. Otherwise, if it's so easy, why didn't you do it, Mr. Owner, right? And then I realized, as I started to get more and more into this game, that's not necessarily how the way the world works, because if you think about it, that has value. One, because it's land's not worth nothing. And then two, if you have the zoning in a county that doesn't allow the zoning, that's actually way more valuable than I initially thought when I first came into this industry. Obviously, I'm not going to tell that owner that when I'm negotiating with them, but if there's no more zoning for mobile home parks, there's some value on a vacant pad. There has to be, because there's nothing else that can be literally built next to you and replaced that allows you to provide value to that community. Because if you didn't have that vacant pad, you'd actually be in a worse position than if you did. And so kind of just talk through a little bit about valuation on upside, specifically vacant pads, or maybe infill, or maybe even development. I know those are kind of two separate things, because one takes more capital than the other, but kind of how you all view it in the brokerage world, because I'm thinking now that given the way that prices are going, there's obviously, that's not a zero value.
And I've only been brokering now for a year. So there's guys out there who would be able to answer this much more scientifically than me. I have spent a lot of time, because I wanted to know for my own curiosity. So I went through the first couple of months I was brokering and did a big database update, got a bunch of data on like 100 or 150 parks of recent sales that had a variety of different things going on, vacant lots, rent upside, and then tried to create some type of pricing model that took into consideration all these things to see how market was actually executing on sales of these types of things. Because if you can figure out market price, and this is true for a buyer, the price that you get in a deal is dependent on your ability to create an argument around the price. And so your argument when you came into the industry on a vacant lot is valid as long as you can get that argument through in a sales pitch, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're doing off-market deals, you should be using that.
Right.
because all that can happen is the guy pushes back on you, and then you just make him right and come and kind of cave a little bit with him and meet in the middle or whatever. You started with 0 and maybe you ended up at $5,000 a pad. That's still a steal. The way that I view vacant lots now is what I do with upside in a deal is I put together basically 3 P&Ls. The first one is, this is like how the park operates today off of, I look at a current rent roll and I look at their expenses basically adjusted, like
Yeah.
you just take normalized industry standard adjustments and try to put something together that, like, if I was going to have to run this thing, that I could run it, maybe not, I'm pushing price here, so it might not be the most comfortable budget I've ever seen, but it's something that I feel like, yeah, I could probably stand behind that budget. And so I look at that P&L and look at the price, the cap rate that I'm using relative to the price and all of that on that P&L. The second P&L, I usually call that the easy upside P&L. And so if I've got vacant, park-owned homes, or if I'm below market on lot rent, then the second P&L is I adjust the lot rents to market and occupy the vacant park-owned homes. It's basically, the going to market rent, that's obviously not going to happen in the first year, but the occupancy fix is a first year thing. So it takes 1 year to fix the occupancy. The rent upside might be captured over a longer time period.
So on the occupancy, just to kind of push on that, how much occupancy are we talking about?
I mean, if the guy's got, like, we're talking about just vacant park-owned homes.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
like something that's easy to fix. I go get a crew or multiple crews, depending on how many there are. That's something I can fix within a year, within 12 months usually.
Yeah, I agree.
Depending on how bad that situation is. And these are 10-year investments usually for most people, or even longer, or at least 7 or 8.
Are you seeing that in the market today, that most people are viewing these as more long-term cash investments, as a buy, fix, and then flip?
We've got the full spectrum. There's groups out there that their investment thesis they sold to their investors is like 50 years.
Wow, 50.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking we're talking about people that operate at the same level as like these major hedge funds and things like that. Their investment, the way they look at deals, some of these insurance companies just look at deals and, like, I mean, they're not modeling out like 50 years or anything, but basically when they do a 10-year model on a thing, if it doesn't quite fit their internal rate of return metrics, that they're not that concerned, because over the course of 50 years, it's going to look like a home run 50 years from now, no matter what they paid for it.
And your IRR obviously decreases over longer periods of time, but that's not their concern. It's more of a cash flow play, I guess, for them, than a more just kind of a flip play. So would you say that's more patient money than, maybe a syndicator?
Those are deals that never make it outside of the off-market game. Like, those are purely off-market game. If you ever get one of those as a broker, you already know where to take it, and those things usually get done kind of back room really quickly. You're talking like stuff that goes to insurance companies, or some of the really super big sophisticated groups that are out there.
Yeah.
Those people are very, very long-term focused most of the time. Some of them aren't, but they're usually fixing like a vacancy issue, or upside in rent at scale. So like the latest example I saw was a group that bought a 1,400 unit park in Florida, and it had a ton of rent upside. It was like a half market, like the market rent was like 800 and their rents were like at 400. And so they're going to take about 7 years to fix that. And when they sell it, on that deal, they're going to make like $100 million of profit, most likely, on that one deal.
What did that trade at as a cap rate for? What was that? And so, like, what did it go to stabilize? So just kind of like a general, like it traded like a 3 cap and goes to a 9 cap or something. Like, how does that?
Yeah, I'd say I think on actual Marcus, McClellan's group out of Marcus and Millichap did that transaction. and I think that they had the current rent, or the current P&L was like a little bit more of like a 3 cap on it. But that rent upside is so huge. I mean, if you modeled out the gross potential of that thing, if they took it to, if you just modeled that thing out as like what the price that they paid, and you just ran that P&L at market rate, plus they had like 100 and some odd vacant lots or something like that, at 100% occupancy, they basically paid a 10 cap for it. And so they'll take 7 years to recapture all of that. And when they go to sell it, they'll probably sell it to, there's 4 or 5 guys that they'll exit that thing to, and they're going to make literally $100 million or more when they do that. They didn't even pay $100 million for it. So
it's just a wild difference.
Are they crazy, or are we crazy? So
yeah, they're like, why are we raising money for that?
Yeah.
That's it's fascinating to think, and sometimes, I deal with kind of smaller value add properties where, we get little pops here and there. But the more you think about it, and the more you kind of like see through it, you can see the value proposition from people playing, the rent increase game and not much else. Right. And so there's large amounts of money if you're doing that cap rate expansion to compression over tens of millions of dollars. Right. It's just few people execute that, but certain people have made tens of millions in mobile home parks by executing that strategy. And I've talked to a few operators like that, and it's just more of like getting yourself around that concept than anything else. But it's kind of fascinating. It's almost like, why am I moving in all these homes?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, so many homes that I can make on, obviously you have investors in X, Y, and Z, but
you gotta have to, like, as a buyer, you gotta have a little niche, I think, is what you gotta do.
100%. And let's push on that a little bit. And if you want to circle back around to upside, more than welcome to, but talk about your niche, talk about the niche, especially important in this group, because I think a lot of people are trying to find that.
When you're trying to scale a business, it's always good to, there's probably like 60, 70, maybe even 80,000 mobile home parks out there. And so if you're talking about whatever your niche might be, you kind of got to narrow that thing down geographically, and then based on the criteria that you're working with. And
question, would you say that being close to home is important, or do you think buying afar is a reasonable strategy?
I think that your portfolio needs to be built around each other more so than being close or far.
Fair. Like, so if you're in California and you decide Iowa is your state, like build a portfolio around Iowa and the surrounding states instead of buying Iowa, Texas, Florida, Wisconsin.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, but it does help to be near where your assets are too. I mean, that's a really good thing to have, to be close by to your parks.
And so what other strategies have you found worked for certain people? So we just talked about the cap rate game, or like the large institutional players and how they view certain things. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the private equity shops are viewing things very similarly. Maybe what are some other strategies that you're kind of seeing?
There's a lack of people out there that are doing infill. Infill is, if you can get good at it, and if you can crack the code, because like some people, they can do it, they can infill a park really fast, but then they're left with a less than optimal rent roll at the end of it, like they got a bunch of park owned homes, or they got too many like long-term RTOs going on, which it's not that big of a deal. It's just like, if it starts standing in your way of getting like agency debt or CMBS debt, that's when it becomes a problem,
If
like
you take your non-recourse out, then it's less attractive. So right. Debt is obviously a player, and kind of like the cap rate, what you're just talking about, several minutes prior.
Yeah, if you're taking a deal where you're almost better off, let's say you're in a market that can only absorb like 5 or 6 home sales a year, and you got to get 20 lots filled. Some guys will go out there and they'll bring in 20 homes and just rent them. But then they're left with some imbalance of like too many park-owned homes for agency loan.
Got it.
In fact, they should have just taken 3 years and just played the absorption rate over those 3 years and had it positioned for a Fannie Mae loan on exit, because the difference in cap rate is, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars on a sale. I mean, a 1 point on your cap rate on,
if not millions, depending on the size. Yeah.
Yeah. If you got a couple $100,000 of NOI, that's a big deal. It's a lot. It's a lot of money. So, you just, I mean, it goes back to a known truth of investing. It's like you literally have to work backwards from your exit every single
I love that. I love that. So we talk about that so much. It is so true.
Yeah. And you got to define your exit further too. I mean, it's not necessarily an exit of
just monetary exit.
Like, yeah, I usually define the exit of my capital, and that's either done through a sale or a refinance. And so I want to figure out what that point in time is, and then I work the plan backwards to have it positioned right for that. And then there's a post, if you're going to keep it with a refinance, there's also some follow-on activities that might happen. So if phase one of my goal is to get it ready for Fannie Mae, then I work backwards from phase one and figure out that plan. But if phase two of my plan is to pull out all of my money through a supplemental, then I work backwards back to phase one and then go from there. It's like you're just always working backwards from an event.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to put it. And I think a few things that I heard through this conversation that I think are really true is, one, find a niche. Two, you got to play the off-market game. And what someone asked a question, we couldn't go through some of the questions as well, but what off-market game means is that you're essentially sourcing deals yourself. You're directly contacting owners. I mean, there's a lot of deals that I bought that a broker wouldn't go after. Like, we bought 66 lots for $500,000 in December, and there's 52 homes on site. It was between two parks, not too far away from each other. And just like for a broker to go, it took me like 9 months to close, from the first contact to close. Like, the amount of money a broker would have made from that, it's just not that much. But it's a good deal for us. Like, that deal will probably be worth, $1.3 million. Well, actually just reappraised for $1.3 million in March. And so, like, for a broker, the amount of value it would take for them to like follow up and do all that and market that, they're just not going to make that much money. Right. Like, and so like they're incentivized for certain types of transactions. And I'm not saying that, I guess what I'm getting at is there's deals kind of below the broker's radars that may make a lot of sense for your strategy, depending on what that is.
Yeah. And it's also very difficult. It's not very difficult for like a broker to price an institutional asset or deals that are in that 75 units and up range. I mean, to price it in a realm of where I can pull in at least 10 qualified offers and work those offers up to a strike price range. If it's a 50 to 75 unit deal and up, that's not very difficult. But if the deal's got hair on it, or if it's got some issue, or if it's small, those are actually even more challenging to price, because your market has shifted. The buyer profile has shifted, and now you're pricing into a buyer profile that's more of an unknown, And so I think more brokers fail at selling those smaller deals. There are brokers out there that make a career selling those things. They make really good money because those things have like big fees on them. They're like 10% fees.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair point.
They are very hard to sell, those smaller deals. I mean, you've had, I mean, I know from my days as a buyer, I mean, every deal we bought, we probably had 3 or 4 under contract that didn't get bought.
Yeah. We backed out of quite a few this year already.
Yeah. These value add deals, you go through due diligence, and if you're doing your job well, and trying not to step on too many landmines, you're going to catch a lot of stuff in due diligence, and you're going to drop a lot of deals.
Yeah. And taxes, Orangeburg pipes, zoning issues. Yeah. I mean, you name it. I mean, exactly. Those are some
of the biggest frustrations as a broker, because you never know those things. And what happens is you get all worked up and you get it under contract, And then all of a sudden, the buyer drops it because of a reason. And sometimes you know the reason, sometimes you don't, and it's like, now you have no idea. I could be working with a park that's got some type of Orangeburg piping, or,
Yeah.
Some things you can see, like, floodplain septic combination type deal, like probably not going to touch that. But,
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges of brokering, like some of the value add properties that are like rough value adds, is that every single one of those deals they have some skeleton in the closet
That you're just waiting
it's
for
going
it
to
to be
come
put
out
out.
and
Yeah.
screw you over here soon, and so you're just waiting for that to happen on those deals.
Yeah, it was a great point. Let's I know I know it's getting a little late, and you obviously have a family life as well. So let's go through some of the questions that people have as well, just so I want this to be of value to everyone. Let me mute the Facebook. Okay. So some of the questions that they have asked: if you were starting today and trying to get away from equity splits and move more towards a preferred return on debt. I'm not quite sure I understand that question. Like, I guess if you're getting someone, I guess you're getting someone who's not getting any of the upside. They're just getting like an 8% return, and then you take all the ups. I don't know if I quite understand that.
Oh, so they're like raising capital in a debt structure?
I think, yeah, that was a while past. So that was kind of when you were talking just about how difficult it is early on to make money on deals. And they're saying, starting today, would you try to get away from equity splits? So I guess if you have an 8% preferred and it goes to 70-30, and move more towards a preferred return on debt.
So I don't, the traditional model of syndicating, I don't really like that much. So the fees don't make any sense. Like acquisition fee being tied to the purchase price is, to me, it seems stupid because it incentivizes a sponsor to pay more. Same thing with asset management fee. I mean, I know that I'm paying, if I raise more money, I know I'm paying a bigger pref, but I'm still, a lot of times my priority of my asset management fee is technically in front of my investors. A lot of guys will put that priority there. And so it also incentivizes me to raise more money. I like an internal rate of return hurdle. They do that a lot in Israel. They do IRR hurdles, and return of capital events, those go back to the investors until they get all their money back. That's a given. But the IRR hurdles kind of do away a little bit with the pref model. But I have seen, more to this guy's question, I have seen some guys where they do an equity debt combination. So a guy might be raising money for a deal, and depending on his uses of capital in the deal, he might be raising a certain amount of, like, if I'm going to put 100 grand into his deal, 70 of it might be used as equity. Another 30 might be used as debt that funds maybe a CapEx project or developing some vacant lots or bringing in some homes or something like that. I've seen that done. I've seen some single family home investors do some pretty wild things by just structuring their entire equity investment as debt and getting away with it. But I just don't know.
Yeah, kind of like private money,
like done in our industry. I mean, people are too smart for that. If you could do it, I would do it. I mean, I would. If anybody on the call wants to put some capital with me as debt, then
let's make it happen. Yeah, if you want a straight 8 and nothing else, like let's talk business.
You have no shortage of people looking for money from you.
Yeah, I agree. What would you classify as a large amount of money? So we have someone asking, what would you class? Because we're just talking about how you starting off, it's just hard to start to get the compounding working. And I guess, what would you classify as a large amount of money? My guess is that's probably maybe from an investment perspective, because we were kind of talking how we both started from less than 100,000. Like, what's your view on that?
The amount of capital that you're playing with, this is what I boiled it down to when I was first starting out. I had like 60 grand, trying to figure out like, well, okay, so what is the annual amount of money I could live off of and what rate of return do I have to make on the money that I've got to make that money? So I figured that like 40 grand was what I needed. And so I actually had more like 80 when I finally bought a deal. But like Kevin and I had a criteria that was literally 50% cash on cash. That was like our first deal. That's why it took 2 years to get it, because it was literally like 50% cash on cash. That was like, that's what it had to be to make it make sense for me to quit my job.
Yeah.
And so the amount of money that you have doesn't matter as much as like how much money do you need to come off of that. And so
it's a good point. Like, what's your real lifestyle really support?
Yeah.
Like your true lifestyle. There's a difference between people, like what they get used to on corporate, where you have a lot of excess and there's a lot of things in your life you don't really need. And I've learned that because I lived with Ryan's parents for 10 months, and I'm not suggesting that anyone does what I did, but like, and then I lived in a mobile home park for 14 months. And so like, I learned through that process though, that like the amount of life that I need is way less than you actually think. Like there's not, like, your lifestyle is filled with a lot of fluff that actually doesn't give you value. And it, in America, it's even more kind of like exaggerated because, there's like a keeping up with the Joneses type society. But if you really boil down like what you really need, you realize a lot of these things aren't making you happy. And I don't know if you found something similar within this process, but
it's not.
I live like on $35,000 a year. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not much.
If I had $1 million a year coming in, it literally wouldn't change anything that I do, because I don't know what I would do. It wouldn't be any different than what I do now. I don't have expensive tastes.
Right.
Outside of that though, like there's almost an opportunity cost too with that. Like if you had $1 million of cash in the bank, you can go out and get 8% on that with any reasonable sponsor. If you're an active investor, it shouldn't be difficult to get an average cash on cash over 5 years of like 12 to 14%. And so what makes more sense? Should you go down the brutal path of owning one of these things and the potential of like screwing it up? Or should you just kick back and just make your 8 pref and some split, Like, and that's even coming from me. Like if I had $1 million in the bank right now, I don't know if I'd even be looking for a deal. I'd be looking for a sponsor.
Yeah. I get it. I totally understand that perspective, just because there's a lot of reasons to, at the end of the day, what do you enjoy doing with your time, right? And so,
I mean, you want to be running down to the trailer park and dealing with that, or do you want to have some guy that does that for you?
Yeah, drinking beers in Florida, baby. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Cool. So let's keep working down this. This one will be good for you. What do you see being automated for owners with all of the consolidation?
I think property management software is going to improve dramatically over the next 5-10 years.
In what ways?
Back when I was with Sunrise looking for operations manager, we came across a candidate that was, I think they were working with Yardi, but they had been on the app development team for an app that what it would do was, a work order would come through your property management system, and it had an entire list of like peer reviewed, like it's all user reviewed people that are in the network to handle that issue. And so it would make recommendations. And I think the app was being designed to actually handle like even the scheduling of that. And so the app had some type of way to it was like the Uber of these types of apps, and it was being integrated directly into some of these property management softwares. And so
how would that look like? So let's say we have a pothole, or like say we have 5 potholes around the community. How would that look?
The app would, so you'd obviously need a road guy, to come fix that. And so the only road guys in its network would be people that had a peer-reviewed rating of a certain rating, like 3.5 out of 5 stars or something like that. If they drop below that, they get knocked out of the thing.
So they give you a list of contractors to then contact?
Yeah, you either contact them, or if you've already identified someone you want to work with, the thing would basically coordinate the whole thing for you.
Oh, so then they would like automatically contact them
Yeah,
to.
like schedule on his calendar, like pull a calendar date, and it
Oh,
would
wow.
run a lot of the coordination effort. I mean, the approval process was still done at the property manager level or with the asset manager. But the app was really starting to get into that type of stuff where it was building this. I mean, just like most apps, it was being released like metro by metro, but you know, like their vision is something that I could see happening over the next 5 to 10 years, and that being integrated fully into property management software, where as big of a pain in the ass as it is to get anything done nowadays with a contractor, that starts to improve dramatically,
The whole scheduling of a contract, yeah.
Right.
That's a
And to know that you're not getting some jackass too, that it's somebody that people that use the software have already verified this person does good work.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of our best recommendations are from people that we know and trust. And so,
Yeah.
like, that's usually where we dip on first before Google, which has a lot of kind of like just shitty reviews, anyways. Okay, cool. That's a great example. I didn't even hear about that. You said that's with Yardi?
I think it was they were working with Yardi. I mean, it's so new. I think they had it working in Tampa. I honestly, I mean, it was a part of like the interview process, and kind of went over it for like 15 minutes, and that was 2 years ago. I couldn't even tell you what the name of that thing was, but
Yeah.
and it might be. I mean, guys, I haven't been into property management software. Well,
outside of this week.
outside of this week, I haven't been in property management software in about 2 years. So I mean, I might be telling you something you already know. So
No, this is all new to me. I'm actually now that you just gave me an idea to maybe speak with someone on like a Zoom call or something, with kind of just talking about maybe some functionality within that, so people can take advantage of it. Let's keep going. So, what is off-market game? I think we described that already. What would be a reason to contact a broker if I find a park off-market? I mean, I guess one of the ways that I've used this, and you can jump in as you see fit, but sometimes brokers, I mean, owners, when you speak with them, aren't going to trust you as in terms of like you're going to be a biased second party. They're going to view you as okay, this guy's trying to steal something from me. And if you legitimately don't know what your park is worth, which is common, some of these owners literally look down for 30 years and then look up and they realize everyone's calling them about their park and they find it's useful.
yeah,
They have no way of like understanding value because one, they don't keep in contact with other people or the market or X and Y and Z. So they might look to a broker or someone else that could give them a kind of like a real value of kind of what's going on in the market, so they're not getting taken advantage of. And we've had situations like that in the past. I don't know if you have seen that. I would say most off market, candidly, I don't bring to brokers, because if I find like I'm getting a good deal and they are as well, understandably, if a broker's doing work, they're going to want to get paid. But if both sides are happy, then I don't see it unnecessary to bring in a third party. But I mean, what about you? Why would you bring in a broker to an off-market property? Maybe if the seller has some concerns.
well, I'll handle the seller concerns second, but the reason I think that for a newer buyer, the thing that I would do in terms of like bringing a broker into the transaction would be, once you lock that thing up under some type of LOI or under contract or something like that, you can always have a broker take a look at it and value it.
Yeah.
Okay, because at the end of the day, you still have the option of closing it, waiting a year through capital gains, and then selling it for a profit. Or if you're trying to sell it to an investor, you've already got a broker opinion of value that supports the price that you're paying. It's not like an appraisal, but it's the next best thing to an appraisal. It's a guy who basically sells parks all day, who told you the value and what he thinks he can get for it. So
I actually feel are better than some appraiser. We got boned by a appraiser recently who just just fundamentally doesn't understand it. So I think a
Right.
broker is more in tune with the market than a lot of appraisers, to be honest.
And that's another thing that a broker can help with, is to basically, and that's where I would bring a broker in for a new guy that maybe doesn't have a finance background, is that if you're a buyer doing an off-market deal with a seller and you feel like that maybe there might be an appraisal issue because the seller's books and records are like, they're garbage,
Yeah,
you can bring a broker into that situation, and the broker can kind of either assist you or do the work himself, depending on how much you pay him, to get those books and records kind of made sense of enough to work with a bank.
that's a
And
good point.
brokers spend their entire day negotiating. So if you want to put them in front of the banker too and have them start working that stuff, I mean, it really depends on how much you pay them to do this kind of stuff, but you can find a role for a broker in a transaction like that where you feel like there might be an appraisal issue, because we do the same thing like for our deals. I mean, we're all the time taking some garbage that some seller gave us and putting it together in a way that a bank can make sense of it, or an appraiser can look at it and not be terrified of it.
Yeah.
And hopefully support a better appraisal that supports the price that's getting paid for it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I don't
mean,
know.
I think you hit on a lot of important points. Brokers serve a really important, they're some of the most educated in the market. You know, they're constantly doing this. Again, you're hiring a professional to help you get accurate information. And so
don't ever hire one to tell you how to operate. Don't ever do that. You know,
yeah,
like,
you get my
rely on, there's people out there that'll tell you how to operate, what's realistic, what's not realistic. But when you want to talk about what it's actually going to trade at market, there's nobody out there aside from the top 5 or 6 brokers that are out there in this industry. Those guys can tell you with precision what that thing's going to trade at market.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
You know?
Let's keep it moving, because how many would you want to own in one state? I think that just really depends on how much you love that state. I mean, I would own, 4,000 lots in North Carolina. I love North Carolina. I like South Carolina. I like South Carolina. Taxes are pretty damn high, but in terms of the property, but outside of that, there's a lot of reasons to like Georgia, the South, all these counties. I love these states, and so I would own a lot. I don't know if there's really any reason why you wouldn't. Do small communities, 10 to 20 sites, qualify for that financing, or only hard and private money? I'd say on those, from my perspective, just kind of running through these, that is most likely seller financing. I mean, you can do some small local financing deals, but there's zero non-recourse options outside of seller financing for a 10 to 20 lot park. You can do hard money, I guess, but I would definitely try to push on.
Too expensive. I mean,
yeah, it's just expensive for what you're getting. And in all honesty, if it's only 10 lots, you probably could do, you might be able to do preferred debt on that. If we're talking preferred debt, there might be a preferred debt. That's kind of like
go to your RIA. I mean, your local RIA, you might find someone out there that might do it.
Agreed. I think that's better than paying 4 points up front and then, 12% on your interest rate or whatever they charge. For cash flow starting out, yes. Your number's lower than expected. Makes no sense. Last question. Without giving too much info, how are you finding owners' info to cold call? And when you find them, do you utilize overseas or hired cold calls if hired off-market deals? I'll answer that real quick, and then we can wrap it up. I want to let you have the opportunity to kind of tell people how to get in touch with you, speak a little bit about maybe Marcus and what you all do, and then we can kind of wrap up. I'd say in general, you just got to look at your audience. If your audience of these park owners, you've got to really qualify who is calling on your behalf. I mean, make sure how they speak and just how they communicate with people. You got to be really aware of all these aspects and kind of the questions that they're asking. I know you've had more success with me than this, but I found very few people that have been successful hiring people overseas on a long-term basis of actually getting deals closed. I usually find it people hiring cold calls within the United States to just better understand these cultural norms. But I don't know, interested to hear your thoughts if you see things differently.
back before I started brokering, I was afraid of the cold call. I would do it, but I didn't want to do it that much. Now I would tell you to nut up and just pick the phone up and call the guy. It's not going to hurt you.
It's really
You
not.
can't reach through the phone and choke you or anything, so just do it. I would make the cold calls myself, unless it's a scaling
100%.
problem. If you're just afraid of it, then just suck it up and do it. You just got to do it. It sucks.
And that's where you're going to find most of your value, because I think one thing I've learned with this business is, unless if you're going for the really low hanging fruit, like the super low hanging fruit, like I'm ready to sell tomorrow, it's a relationship game, and you can't outsource a relationship. So you're having a 15-minute call every 6 months, checking in and making references to things that you've talked in the past and speaking about the market and all these other things, which is not like a sales tactic and sales script that you have. And some of those things are useful and helpful. But if you're not like generally trying to be a valuable person, I can't help you. Like there's nothing I can say to you that's going to get you in front of owners to get deals done. I've never closed a deal off the first call. It just hasn't happened to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. And so if you're that scared of cold calls, partner with someone who does, or, find someone in the United States who has a sales background, but you're going to have to pay them for that. You're going to really have to, if someone can close $500,000 deals, you would expect them to, demand a premium for that skill. Otherwise, I would reach out to people and do it yourself. It's a great skill to have. And honestly, a lot of these people are really sweet, kind, nice, like willing to be helpful. Obviously, you get a few bad in the bunch, but for the most part, mobile home park owners, I haven't found many of them to be like this group of people that have been so vicious. You gotta look at your approach. Like your approach has to be solid too. Like you can't be a robot in the way that you approach them, because they get called quite a bit. And if you don't view that in that way, then you will get hung up on and slammed and curse words and stuff. But if you approach them in like a reasonable, decent fashion, I've never found, you occasionally get it, but for the most part, these people are very kind and open. I don't know if you see it differently.
Yeah, just do the research, find their contact info, and bite the list off in bite-sized chunks. Like if you've never done cold calling before, then I overdo it on the data collection side. So like I'll go call the park manager, and everyone wants to call the park manager and act like there's some tenant moving into the park. I'd call them and act like I'm a broker, exactly what I'm doing a rent survey. And a lot of times they'll tell you things like they don't like the way the owner's managing the place, or this or that, the other thing. And we've gotten listings before at Marcus by basically, we get this data from the park manager and sending, like basically getting the good idea fairy going with the park manager to see if the seller would, or the owner would like to sell, and encouraging that, that sales pitch to come from them, kind of like, lay the seed, and maybe we'll hit them with a cold call afterwards. Like you can never go wrong by collecting a bunch of data, but if you're going to go blind in a cold call, the worst thing can happen to you in a cold call is you get through your little 30-second jingle, and the guy actually wants to talk to you after you get through it, and you have nothing left to say, Yeah. So have something to say, have enough research done beforehand to kind of know roundabout where you can pay the price, what kind of price you could pay. Do enough research on those parks you're going to call on to where you kind of have a feeling about what this thing's worth before you actually talk to them, because you don't know. You might get on the phone and be like, well, just make me an offer, and tell you nothing. You got to be able to do that, or else you're going to, maybe you've wasted your time.
So. Yeah, exactly. Well, Charles, I am extremely grateful for your time. I think, we had 20 plus people on this thing for well over an hour. So let me just say, when I first did my first one last week, I had about 3 people. So something about you, Charles, is getting people in the door. So
no, do I? I don't know.
I appreciate. I
never know what I'm doing. I just start talking out of my ass, and everyone seems to think it's right.
Well, for whatever reason, keep doing what you're doing, because people love to hear what you have to say. Tell us, I guess, a little bit about how to get in touch with you, and a little bit about Marcus, and then I guess we'll call it a night.
Yeah. I don't know, Marcus Millichap, they're a big brokerage firm, I think top 10 brokerage firm or whatever. And then got a couple of good teams out there for mobile home parks. I mean, there's a good team down in Texas. It's Robert Denninger's team. There's our team out in the Southeast with Glenn Esterson. We do pretty much nationwide, but we're focused on the Southeast. And there's McClellan's group up north. Doug Danny's team out in California. They do West Coast stuff. Those are the four big teams that I know about at Marcus, but I don't know. We do tons, and I can't even tell you how many transactions that Marcus does over the course of a year in this industry. Outside of that, my contact information, 276-237-4311 is my phone number. And then my work email is charles.dehart@marcusmillichap.com.
Okay, maybe we'll just put that at within the comments. If you wouldn't mind, just maybe drop that in the comments on Facebook.
Sure.
So then people can reach out to you. I think you gave a lot of great information. I love your brutal honesty, man. You really, you cut through the noise, and I think a lot of people were very grateful for your candor. So thanks so much for your time. I'm extremely excited to connect with you going forward. And if you would like to get in touch with Charles, I will say this with 100% honesty. Charles helped me bring me into this industry in 2015, and we talk several times a year. And I must say, every time we talk, I am greatly appreciative of the relationship we have. So thank you for all that you've done for this industry, and thanks for all the value you've given tonight.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we helped each other get into it. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. All right. I just stopped the live stream, and I'll stop the recording as well. But yeah, man, I think that went really well. Like, you actually had a ton of people tuning in, and a lot of questions. So
cool.